Welcome to Real Clear Radio Hour, brought to you by the Competitive Enterprise Institute. I'm your host, Bill Frezza. This week marks the 10th anniversary of the Hurricane Katrina disaster. In the second half of our show, we'll talk to Emily Chamley-Wright, Senior Research Scholar at the Mercatus Center and Dean at Washington College, whose Gulf Coast Recovery Project takes a detailed look at the factors that aided or retarded the rebuilding of New Orleans. Up first, we're pleased to welcome Adam Andrzejewski, Chairman of American Transparency and founder of OpenTheBooks.com, to discuss his organization's efforts to demystify government spending. Adam, welcome to the show.
Great to be on the program, Bill.
Adam, I stopped by your website, OpenTheBooks.com, prior to the show, and down on the bottom is a horrifying sight. It's a running ticker of federal spending by category, including things like farm subsidies and direct payments and so on. The numbers are moving so fast your eyes can barely keep up with them. I mean, it adds up into the trillions. What are people supposed to do with this information? It's not like we have any control over government spending.
Well, on our website and our mobile app and our different search tools, what we've done is we figured politicians would go crazy if we posted every dime that was taxed and spent at every level of government across the country. And so, Bill, that's exactly what we did. We've aggregated the world's largest private repository of public spending. So at the federal level, I think it goes right to your question. We're one-stop shopping. If you want to know the salaries of 2.5 million federal employees, we have their salary and bonus history since 2007. If you want to know federal expenditures, we've captured all disclosed federal expenditures since the year 2001, and we even have dipped down into the 34,000 units of local government across the country, so you can see what the local bureaucrats are making, the school teachers, the municipal managers, and quite frankly, when you see the information, the most common response is, I'm in the wrong business.
How do you get your hands on all this stuff? I would expect much of it would be jealously guarded.
Well, it is. We've set up an entire team, the infrastructure to file tens of thousands of Freedom of Information Act requests a year. And a large portion of our strategy is also legal, the inflection point lawsuit, to make sure that we get what we're asking for. For example, right now in the state of New York, we've divided the state into 9 regions. We're requesting the municipal information, the checkbook information at the local level from these units of government. And it is hand-to-hand combat in the state of New York. But we're pioneering transparency at the local level with partners like Reclaim New York in the state of New York. And it is a job worthy of a lifetime of legacy.
What's the Google Your Government Act? That seems to have played some kind of role in this.
Well, we're really proud to carry forth U.S. Senator Tom Coburn, he's now retired, his legacy at the federal level. So Coburn and Obama, if you remember back in 2006, they co-sponsored the Google Your Government Act. For the first time, they opened up the federal checkbook on a line-by-line basis to transparency. It was groundbreaking work, and it makes our work at the federal level possible. Coburn is now the honorary chairman of American Transparency. We announced this past February, and his legacy in Congress is twofold. It's robust and deep transparency, aggressive transparency, every dime online. And it's also, if you remember, he did the Waste Box report, where he identified billions of dollars worth of federal government waste every single year. So it's that scrutiny, it's that oversight, and we plan to carry forward that Coburn's deep legacy, both on transparency and accountability.
I want to dig into the website a little bit because it's been so much fun poking around. What goes into the category of federal direct spending? What does that include?
Federal direct spending is going to be payments to, like for housing, for Section 8 housing. It's going to be federal transfer payments to citizens.
Does this count Social Security?
The recipients of that are not going to be identified on a name-by-name basis, but on a block basis.
So basically, any check that goes to some direct person or entity goes into federal direct payments.
Right. And we also have 4 other categories. You mentioned farm subsidies earlier. There's grants, there's contracts, there's loans, and I think that rounds out the category. Of course, we also have the salary histories.
I'm looking at the running clock for this fiscal year, which is heading toward $1 trillion for all states. California seems to be leading the way with $72 billion. Pennsylvania running neck and neck. What makes them stand out?
I think just the sheer size of California as the most populous state, they're going to lead in the federal flow of funds from Washington, D.C. And I do want to point out to your listening audience that they can see all of this federal flow of funds. And it is massive and it is stunning. It's actually astonishing, and it will anger you if you download our free mobile application. It's called Open the Books. It's free for Apple and Android. And for any zip code in the country or where you're standing in the country, you can take a radius from 1 to 50 miles and see the federal
where the
flow of
money's
funds
going
on a line-by-line basis into your zip code.
Do you think that might attract more activists to the cause of fiscal responsibility?
Well, I do. 2 years ago, when we exposed the federal checkbook with the mobile application, I wrote an op-ed for the Wall Street Journal, and they published it, and I encouraged every single citizen across the state to use our app, take a peek at the spending, and as soon as you see that spending, you'll want to start holding somebody accountable, start asking the questions, demand the answers, and bring the heat to the political class so they see the light.
I see that Open the Books has not just current spending, but spending history. What are the high-level conclusions you can come to when you look at the overall spending patterns, at least for the years you've been able to collect the data?
It makes spending a bipartisan issue. The excesses of government and the overspending a bipartisan issue that runs through multiple presidential administrations. So you've got George W. Bush followed by Barack Obama. And what we found is George W. Bush put spending on steroids, and Barack Obama continued that spending and did not significantly dial it back, of course.
Adam, clicking on my own state of Massachusetts, I saw a listing of state employee salaries from highest to lowest, which was interesting. The University of Massachusetts seems to have won the lottery for the highest paid state employees. It's mind-boggling how many college administrators, taxpayers are paying over $500,000 a year. What's that all about?
That's true, and oftentimes you do have to distinguish between state employees and university-run medical systems with their doctors. So, for instance, in Chicago, there are certain doctors that make over $2 million a year. They are state university employees, and state taxpayers are on the hook for their pensions. What we have found just across the country is that, like in the state of California, there are 15,000 public employees at the local, state, and the federal level that out-earn every governor of the 50 states. And those 15,000 in California literally clean off $5 billion of total compensation at taxpayer expense. You know, with $18 trillion at the federal level of debt, the states all have large debts. At the local and municipal level, you know, the city of Chicago has $19,000 per man, woman, and child of pension liabilities. There's no money left. We have to rethink government at all levels, and I think transparency helps us do so.
Adam, you mentioned public employee pension obligations, which have bankrupted or are threatening to bankrupt many state and city governments. What data do you have on that on the site?
So in terms of gross aggregated liabilities, we don't capture that. Other think tanks do that work. What we do is we display what the pensions are. So for instance, in Illinois, a couple of years ago, the Chicago Tribune outed a union boss that was able to substitute teach for one day in the public school system and then stood in line to get $1 million worth of teacher pension. And there was a couple of them, 2 of them.
That's a great deal.
They quickly passed a state law. The governor said they stopped it. Every editorial board in the state puffed their chests and patted themselves on the back. And then about a year ago, in our data, we found that those 2 guys got their $1 million worth of pension. That's exactly why transparency is important. In Illinois, somebody retired out of the governor's administration downstate, and they were getting $10,000 a month more than what they should have been getting on their pension. Transparency also outed that. And so we've issued the call not only at the state level. In many states, pensions are still not subject to Freedom of Information Act law, but we've issued the clarion call at the federal level. The Obama administration has rejected, Bill, our Freedom of Information Act request for the federal pensions, calling it an invasion of personal privacy.
Oh, how
and
nice.
Wouldn't you like to know Lewis Lerner's pension or some of these other people that have gotten fired, in addition to your congressman's pension?
It's a lot easier to operate the government in the dark, isn't it?
Absolutely. And how can you debate public policy without having access to the hard facts? You'd never make the decisions in the private sector and business without hard facts, and the citizens need the hard facts to debate the public policy in government.
So, Adam, you've been giving us quite a bit of insight into where all our taxpayer dollars are going. What got you interested in outing all these big spenders?
Well, in 2010, I ran for governor of Illinois. I ran as a private sector business guy. I had recently sold a Yellow Pages publishing company. We did hometown phone books, and I started that from my small town where I grew up, literally in the middle of nowhere, Herscher, Illinois, population 1,000 people. And it was successful. I sold that back in 2007. I decided to run for the top job knowing less than 5 elected officials in the whole state, and we did well. One of the greatest political privileges on that race was being endorsed by Lech Wałęsa, one of the greatest champions of freedom and liberty in the 20th century,
How nice.
who flew into Chicago just a couple of days before the election and endorsed my campaign. I came in 5% short, running on an aggressive transparency platform. The tagline slogan is familiar to all of us now. It's to post every dime online in real time. And I lost the race, but I might be the only politician in the history of the country to execute on the promise after a loss. I believed in the mission.
You fulfilled your campaign promise without being elected.
So we just started, and openthebooks.com is the website that forms the basis of the execution on my campaign promise from 2010. And so we've aggregated and captured 2.3 billion individual government expenditures on the website in the mobile app, and we also have a search widget that anyone can install on their own website. So anybody that comes to your website can also search local, state, and federal spending across America.
What are some of the most interesting stories you uncovered digging around in all this data?
Well, I think something that I discovered yesterday on a tip from a donor in Newport Beach, California, there's 5 lifeguards that make over $101,000. And that leads to a larger problem that we discussed earlier, that 15,000 public employees in the state of California clean off $5 billion. It's outrageous. In Illinois, we've got a journalist. I'm of Polish ancestry and heritage. And in the old Poland and the old Soviet Union, government used to buy a journalist. Well, in the state of Illinois, out of the state of Illinois checkbook, we quantified $250,000 flowing into a journalist who has a subscription blog in our state capital from 70 state agencies. And even in the month of July, when Illinois faced a budget shutdown without a budget and social service agencies were being starved, thousands of dollars was being paid from Comptroller Munger, a Republican, into this Capital Facts subscription blog.
Politicians buying journalists is one thing, but politicians buying voters is a lot more scary. Adam, how many voters are on the dole?
Well, I think Mitt Romney had it wrong when he ran against Barack Obama in 2012. Romney made the historic comment that 47% of people were on the dole. And our data, euphemistically, we think like 87% of people are on the dole. When we studied the Fortune 100, quantified the federal flow of funds into the most successful companies in the world, for the first time in history, we found $1.3 trillion since 2001 flowed into the Fortune 100. That prompted Steve Moore to call them corporate welfare queens. David Stockman, Reagan's former budget chief, said Reagan would weep if he knew what happened to his war on government funding big corporations. So, look, the pernicious influence of government spending has invaded most households, most companies, most entities across the land.
Talking about corporate welfare, I understand you follow the exploits of the Export-Import Bank, which is desperately trying to regain congressional support. What did you learn looking at their numbers?
Well, we're proud of the small part we played in the larger national narrative on the Export-Import Bank reauthorization. So let's look at the results. It expired. After 81 years, at the end of June, it was not reauthorized by Congress. Now, is it going to rise from the dead? It's anyone's guess. But the major players, Heritage, Cato, Mercatus Institute, they were on this for years. We kind of came in the last 45 days of the debate. And here's what we questioned. We said, how is the funding of dictators, the propping up of authoritarian regimes, and the destabilizing of domestic industries, how is that good for our economic growth? And we made that argument, and we put together a lot of numbers that were impactful. Pemex was the number one importer backed by our government's bank. And Pemex pays roughly $1 out of every $3 of its profits. It's Mexican government owned, and those dollars flow into the Mexican treasury in the form of high taxes. This was just foreign aid. The Export-Import Bank was up 248% under Barack Obama. Payroll grew 2 times faster than inflation.
Wow.
We found American companies on both sides of the Export-Import Bank transaction. They were functioning as the domestic exporter and using a foreign subsidiary as the foreign importer, like ExxonMobil on the Papua New Guinea project. We found that the American iron ore industry was being threatened because of a $635 million backing of loans into Roy Hill Holdings in Australia. We found, Chinese companies backed by our government's bank loan to the tune of $3.5 billion. And it was never about small businesses.
No.
And it was all about the passing of cronyism. And I don't call it crony capitalism because capitalism shouldn't function on a crony public-backed basis.
Well, crony corporatism is probably a more fitting attribution. I understand that Project Veritas got some congressional staffers on hidden camera admitting to pay to play with the Exim Bank. What was that all about?
Right. James O'Keefe at Project Veritas, they do very good work putting the video narrative to hard facts. And so, although I just ran through a laundry list of hard facts, what's oftentimes much more impactful is if you can see somebody from the bank actually say it or a congressional staffer say it. And that's what James O'Keefe did. He asked them at a conference, and they were forthrightly told them that there is, quote, a legalized money laundering scheme between loans, backing, political support, and campaign cash. And so I don't think it's going to surprise anybody. That's the Illinois way. Barack Obama brought that to Washington, D.C., and it's gone writ large national.
Predates Barack Obama by a long way. This is a bipartisan issue.
Well, we looked at Rahm Emanuel. Rahm Emanuel in the city of Chicago, he left the Obama administration, became the mayor of Chicago, and he vowed to end pay-to-play in the historic culture of corruption in the city of Chicago, Bill. And so for the Stossel Show, we fact-checked that promise, and we found 600 city vendors, gave them $7 million of campaign cash, and received $2 billion worth of city payments.
That's a great return on investment.
Probably the best in the history of the world.
Well, this goes really back to the Tammany Hall way of doing business, but we seem to have legalized it. I mean, what Tammany Hall was doing was illegal. They were eventually outed in New York. There was all sorts of reforms, but I think you'd be hard-pressed to claim that all this cash flowing into the pockets of politicians to keep it going is actually illegal.
I agree with you, and I make the point at Forbes, where I'm a contributor, the moral bankruptcy of the Chicago elites. While the city careens toward bankruptcy, while there was 10,000 shootings in the last 5 years in the city, while there's 19,000 of long-term pension liability, while 1 million citizens fled the city for greener pastures elsewhere since 1950, the elites, the business and civic leaders of the city are literally fleecing the system while regular people face bleak futures.
It works for them. So, Adam, you've done a great job of trying to track spending, but there's two sides to a income statement, and that's revenue. Has anyone tried to take the spending data you've collected and the tax revenue data and put them into standard GAAP accounting format so we can get some kind of picture of whether the government's books are balanced?
Well, I think that would just blow CPA. I don't think CPAs could even put this into the type of accounting that the private sector.
You know what? The government of New Zealand has done it. I actually wrote a monograph recently going over the history of that because they were a socialist basket case back in the 80s, and they put the whole government on GAAP accounting. It's something you should study, and it published it. So the government spending and revenues is all online for everyone to see, and it's done amazing things for their country.
Well, and we got started on the work on the spending side because we noticed over the course of the last 20 years, all the conversation was on the revenue side. And the center left was able to use emotion to always sway for more revenue. But when you take a look, like a business does in private enterprise, at the spending side, no politician, and it cuts across party lines, can justify their tax and spend decisions. And so on that basis, we felt that robust and aggressive transparency was the silver bullet to limit government excesses and create smart government that delivers efficient services.
Adam, you've worked hard to strike a nonpartisan stance. You're trying to get the attention of the average voter to what's going on behind the scenes. In the long run, what do you really hope to accomplish by forcing more government transparency?
We want government services delivered efficiently. Government has a role, and it's to serve people that have real needs, that cannot serve themselves, the disabled, the vulnerable, the people that cannot take care of themselves. And those people, we have a moral obligation to deliver efficient and effective service to those people. So we want to iron it by putting 10 million eyes on federal, local, and state spending. What we want to do is squeeze out the waste, the fraud, the corruption, and abuse. And right now, people, because technology is giving us the ability, people have the power to take on government waste, fraud, corruption, and abuse from the palm of your hand using our mobile app that Open the Books. Right from your cell phone, you could begin this process.
Imagine if every blogger and journalist started their day poking around looking for stories there.
no matter where we look, we find gainful examples where more questions need to be asked, and it doesn't take long.
Adam, we all love to complain about government spending, at least the spending that doesn't end up back in our own pockets. What obligation do we have to get involved?
Well, people need to stop venting blindly, Bill. People simply, I make the argument that you cannot complain about Washington, D.C. You can't complain about the spending in your state capital or locally until you take a look, review that spending, start asking questions, and demand answers of your elected officials. A great former U.S. Senator from Illinois, Everett Dirksen, said, "When I feel the heat, I see the light." And we have found that in Illinois. When you ask questions, when you demand answers, you get better public policy.
Adam, thanks so much for your work, and thanks for coming on the show.
Great. Happy to be on, Bill. Thank you very much for having me.
That was Adam Andrzejewski from OpenTheBooks.com here on Real Clear Radio Hour, brought to you by the Competitive Enterprise Institute. I'm your host, Bill Frezza. You can check out Real Clear Radio on Facebook or follow us on Twitter at Real Clear Frezza. And stop by RealClearMarkets.com, my go-to place for diverse views on political economics. Real Clear Radio Hour is a not-for-profit, donor-supported program. Please stop by RealClearRadio.org and hit the donate button or contact us to become a corporate supporter. Ahead, we'll speak with Emily Chamley-Wright from the Mercatus Center about her work tracking the recovery of New Orleans on this, the 10th anniversary of Hurricane Katrina. Stay tuned.